And away we go. All right, so we're office hours. May 6th, 2021. I'm gonna do some demos here of config read-only, config split, and config ignore. And I haven't really prepped anything other than I've used all three of these modules. I use config split and config read-only quite often. So I'm gonna go ahead and, well, let me just take you on tour what I have. It's the same site I've been using for the DCO class for the past week, which is the latest Drupal 9 with Olivero. And for some reason, I guess my homepage is set to user 1. I don't know how that happened, but so I've got a local environment running and a Pantheon dev environment of the same site. And I've got my command line going over here, and I've got the files open over there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a ddev, not drush, composer require Drupal/config read-only, Drupal/config split, and Drupal/config ignore. I believe both config split and config ignore also require config filter. So that's why we got config filter coming in. I'm using Composer 2, so it's super fast. So that's kind of nice. So let's go ahead and ddev drush enable config read only. And just a reminder of what config read only does is it will basically allow us to lock down, lock down configuration changes in a particular environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure config read only so that you cannot submit any configuration forms on Pantheon dev. So something like this, basic site settings. If when I'm done, there's going to be a message up here saying configuration is locked, and this button is going to be grayed out. And even if you try and trick it by putting a cursor in a field and hitting return, you will not be able to submit that form with config read only. Those of you who have taken a class, well, all of you have taken a class, but it is like training wheels for the configuration system. It makes it impossible for you to overwrite remote config because there is no remote config because it's locked. All right, so, oh, how do I spell it right? Config readly. Config read only. So you have to do more than just enable it, because if we just enable it, and I've just enabled it on my local, if all I do, I can reload this, I can come to configuration, system, basic site settings, and clearly I can still make changes. The button is not grayed out, even though the module is, oops. I hate it when they spell it differently. Like here it's read dash only. Well, there it's read dash only too, but the machine name is just without the dash. It makes me a little nutty. But even though it's enabled, clearly I can still install stuff. So nothing happens. So if you come over here, basically the trick is in order to enable it, you actually have to put this. Well, it's installed, but in order to enable it, you have to put this in your settings.php. So let's do a quick experiment, and let's put this in settings.local. Just so we do lock down our local, which you probably never want to do, but let's just do it as a little experiment here. So I'm going to come over to my site. I'm going to go to web, sites, default, wider. Oh, do I not have a settings local here? Oh, bad developer. So let's take care of that right now. Ddev drush generate settings local. Get that generated. All right, problem solved, but let's also make sure that's getting included. So that is getting included, so we're good with that. So close. So we're gonna come to our settings.local, and I'm just gonna come down to the bottom, and I'm just gonna put this in to, here, I'll make this a little bit bigger. just in case. There we go. Put this in, and it basically, that's the trigger that makes config read only active. So if I come over here, again, on my local DDev site, hit reload, oops, and hit reload. There we go, warning. This form will not be saved because the configuration active store is read only. You know, I can't trick it, I can't, you know, I'm hitting enter and it's not submitting the form. But we don't want it on local. We want local to be unlocked while we want Pantheon to be locked, right? So how can we do that? Well, it really depends how you have your settings.php files set up. So one thing you could do is in your settings.pantheon.php, you could sneak it in here. All right, we could come in here and put it in there. And basically, what will happen is that's going to be included every time. So this really isn't going to change anything. You know, if I put it in there on my local, then I don't know if I hit save. So I'm going to come over here and I save, I'm still going to be locked on my local. And if I were to commit and push that up to Pantheon, I'd be locked on Pantheon as well. But if you start looking at this Pantheon or settings.pantheon, you'll see they actually use environment variables. So a lot of hosts have environment variables that will tell you if, if you're hosted, if the current environment is a Pantheon environment, then you can do stuff. I know Acquia has it, Platform has it, all the major hosts have environment variables. So what we can do is we can kind of steal this idea and just wrap this. And this basically says if this environment variable is set, then make it true. If it's not set, then it won't be true. So this will work, because our local is not a Pantheon environment, so we're unlocked. If we were to commit and push this, would it work? Well, in this case, I don't think it actually would. And let me just verify that, and then I'll tell you why. If we look at the git ignore, you'll see that settings.pantheon is ignored, which means it's not even going to be in the repo, right? So if we can come over here and do a git status. And notice, the composer stuff has changed. That's because I added modules, but there's no change to settings or settings.pantheon, and settings.local is ignored as well. So this won't do anything. This won't do anything if there's nothing to commit. And the reason why is because this is a scaffolding file. This is a scaffolding file that's managed by Pantheon. So remember, this is using the integrated, well, not remember, those of you who weren't in the class, who are not the DCO 2021 students, integrated composer on Pantheon, one of the things it includes is the Pantheon Upstream. And if we look at Pantheon Upstream, composer.json, keep on making all these bigger. It includes this dependency, Pantheon system Drupal integrations, and this is what provides the Pantheon scaffolding files, like Pantheon or settings.pantheon.php. So we're never going to be able to affect change in settings.pantheon on Pantheon hardware. So let's take that out of there. How about if we put this in settings.php, though? Because I do not believe that settings, and we'll check this, but I do not believe that settings.php is ignored. Let's find out. It is not ignored, so we can commit that. And we can still wrap it in the environment variable. So this is often like the tricky part of config read only, is how to get it so you can leave it enabled everywhere, right? But only have it active in certain environments. And usually the answer is with environment variables. And Pantheon, actually, there's more. If you do a search on for Pantheon docs, platform docs, Acquia docs, there's actually more environment variables. They'll actually tell you what, if it's dev stage, what the name of the environment is, if it's production. So you can actually write, more complex if statements. Like if you only want it, true on live, Acquia live or Pantheon live, you can craft an if statement to do that. So if I come over here and hit reload on my local, I'm still unlocked. And theoretically, if I commit and push this, I should be locked up on Pantheon. So let's give that a shot. So git status, spell it right. Git add composer.json, composer.lock, and websites default settings.php. Git status, git commit-m added config contrib modules configured. Oh, actually, we forgot something. What did we forget? I'm specifically looking at Terry, John, and Breck. What did we learn earlier this week? The fact that we enabled a module is configuration. We enabled config read only. So we want to capture that configuration so that when we push up to Pantheon, then we can do a config import and then the module will be enabled for us. So we want to capture all that configuration. So let's config export locally. And the only one that changes is the core extension. And if we take a look at that, git diff config core.extension, you'll see the only change is the addition of config read only. The 0 is not 0 uninstalled, 1 installed. It's actually the module weight. So you can give a module weight so that its hooks fire later than another module's. By default, they're all equal. Just the fact that it's listed in here is what makes it an installed module. So git add, config, git status, git commit dash, oh my gosh. Git commit dash m. All right, so what do we do? Added config contrib modules, installed and configured config read only. Can I put the word config in? No, that was only twice. That wasn't too bad. All right, git status, git push origin master. Get that going, because for those of you who haven't used the new integrated composer stuff with Pantheon, it's in limited availability, so it's like beta. Basically, it allows you to have a fully, like a Drupal 9 site that's fully composer based in Pantheon without your dependencies being committed. So basically the big change here is, and actually you'll see it right here, whenever you push, it does this build artifact, which basically means it does a composer install on Pantheon hardware. So this is the right way to do it. So, but the downside is it takes a couple extra minutes for your dev site to be ready. So we'll have to wait that out. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Good, how's it going?
Good, good, good. We are recording, just so you know.
Thanks.
So watch your tone with me. Not that you would ever. I think we all know who I'm talking about when I say watch your tone.
Oh, yeah. Nobody knows.
Oh, it's a giant mystery. It's raining pretty hard here in North Carolina. It is full on, and it's like 30 degrees, so it's windy out there too. No, I mean, the rain is coming down at an angle of like 30 degrees, not 30 degrees temperature. You're muted, so I don't know what you're saying. You're just talking.
It's still pretty light yet here.
I got it all going on here. Thunder, rain. Okay, look, it finished. Okay, so Where's my cursor? There it is. All right, so let's go to Pantheon dev. So I'm going to reload here. We're not going to see config read only yet because we have to import that config. So if we come over here, oh, I guess I'm going to blow away. Oh yeah. Okay, don't worry about this. This is from class on Wednesday, but we're going to add the config read only module being enabled. So let's import that. Unable to install the config read only modules. Well, that's surprising, considering this could be a caching issue. Yeah, I think this is going to be a caching issue because it clearly exists. So let me just, although I think when Pantheon polls, let me just try it again. When Pantheon polls, it should clear the gap. Right? For some reason, it was like a little temporary caching issue. I didn't actually have to rebuild. Okay, there we go. Config was imported successfully. So let's see if everything worked. So if I go to System, Basic Site Settings, there we go. We are now locked on Pantheon. And we should still be unlocked here. Woo! So, this is good because, someone can't come in here and start messing with our content types. We can come over to Add Field. Well, here, we have to go through that process. Let me just go to an edit page. Right? Cannot save anything. And on the downside, you can't move blocks around, right? So this page is locked. If we wanted to, even if we wanted to change a visibility rule of a block, it's all configuration. So it's all locked down hard. So one of the things you can do with config read only is, let me see if it's here. Maybe it's in the README now.
I think it was down at the bottom.
Oh, was it? Did I miss it?
It said something about whitelist.
Yeah, it's in the README. Okay, so I was going to go to the README over here anyway. So where am I? I am in Web, Modules, Composer, Config Read Only, README. Okay, I'll make this bigger. So here, so we can actually set whitelist pattern. So we can do it in the settings. I didn't even realize they have a hook. Now we can do it in a hook. But let's just go ahead and implement some whitelist patterns. Really should be an allow list. Okay, so where am I? Oh, I was already where I needed to be. So let's go back to our settings.php, and I'm just going to put all of this inside this loop so it's all in one place. I don't know how to do it in VB Edit. That's what I want to do. So it's all right. So you can allow certain configs to not be ignored. So let's just do block.block.star. So why am I doing that? Well, because any of these configurations ultimately get saved in something like this. These are all block.block.olivero, admin. So basically it unlocks, and if we want, we could say, let's lock the Claro ones, but let's unlock the Olivero ones. But let's just unlock all of them. And we're going to do that, just like I said, by adding the pattern. So let me clean this up a little bit. Holy cow, it's raining. My power blinks, you'll know what happened to me. Marvin, that's fair. Yep, absolutely fair. And David said you can also have added a check to send them for the DDEV environment. Yep, DDEV does have environment, and I think Lando, DDEV, I'm sure Doxel does too, has environmental variables, so you can check to see if you're running in DDEV, just like I checked to see if you're running in Pantheon. That's a very good point. Appreciate it. All right, so let's go back here, get status. git add websites. Well, before I do this, let me just, on the off chance there's a typo in there, let me just make sure the page still loads. Okay. And the reason I did that is, let's just say maybe I forgot like I don't know. Let's say I put maybe 2 semicolons. Will that break it? Just a little typo. Nope, I gotta do something bigger than that. Well, let's say I put like a round parenthesis there instead of a square parenthesis. That should break. Yeah. And why I'm using settings.local. Oh, well, I broke it in settings, so that's why. So that's why it's always good just to check, even though it's not going to be in use in this environment. More of a syntax check. All right, websites, default, settings.php, git status, git commit dash m, added config read-only exemption for block.blah.star configs. Git push origin master. So Marvin, in what it, I'm going to defend myself just for a second. I can't change for Pantheon sites until Pantheon changes it on their end. I can't change it on my end. So, no, David, I think the standard is allow deny list instead of red or green list. I think that's what the standard's moving, going from whitelist, blacklist to allow list, deny list. Red green just reminds me of the game, the kid game, red light, green light, or Red Rover. All right, so we got to kill a couple minutes here. Does its thing.
So I noticed in your folder structure under modules, you have composer instead of contrib. When did that change?
Is, yeah, so that is something that when you use this integrated composer with Pantheon, you know, this is not based on, well, this is their template.
Okay.
And their template does specify basically anything that composer manages goes in a composer directory.
Okay, so that wasn't something introduced in like 9.2 or something.
Nope, okay. It's strictly, and I actually like the way they did this. I mean, it makes no difference to me if it's called composer or contrib. But this is a really nice template because the upstream template is basically, it's really close to the Drupal recommended project template. You know, it basically has, you know, that's the meat of the recommended project template. And then it includes composer patches on top of that, the Pantheon integration. And then the Pantheon folks have always loved these Drupal optimizations, which lets composer run a little bit faster. So it's a really nice composer template, which I'm not super surprised because one of the main people behind the core recommended project template was one of the Pantheon engineers. So, all right, so that's done. So if I come over here and, so I think this page will still be, oh, I have to config, oh no, I don't have to config import. This page should still be locked. Because submitting this isn't exactly the same as just submitting one of these, I believe. Yeah, so when you come to an individual block, you can save it. And you can do all the same stuff here. You can, you know, you can change the region. Maybe you can't change the weight. So there might be something else that we'd have to exempt. I don't know what that would be off the top of my head, but there's probably, I guess it would be whatever controls, whatever config this page is related to. So I don't know what that one would be, but, you know, for now, let's ignore that. So you can exempt, if you don't want to lock views or a view, you can make your exemptions as generic or as specific as you would like. All right, so that's config read only. Should we move on to config split? I'm going to take that as a heck yeah, Mike. We should definitely move on to config split. All right.
Heck yeah, split. Mike. We should definitely move on to config split.
This is why we continue to invite you, Marvin, because you come through.
What are we waiting for?
All right. So config split allows us to split off some configuration, that you only want used in certain places. So the classic example is the one we're going to do. So I'm going to come back here on my local, and I'm not going to touch anything with my with config read only. We'll let that be. But I'm going to make sure stage. Oh, I don't have stage file proxy. Well, here let's do. Well, let me do stage file proxy because that's the one that everyone needs. So ddev composer require Drupal / stage file proxy. Let me just get my settings. Where are they? Where's Typinator? There you are. Drupal config. Go. All right. So you see it because I had messed with the settings.pantheon. It was, the scaffolding plugin said, oh, someone messed with it. I'm going to recreate it fresh. So that's what that was. We now have stage file proxy. So let's do a ddev drush enable stage file proxy. While that's going, I'm going to come into my, oh, there it is. I'm going to come back into my settings.local. And on the bottom, I'm going to put my stage file proxy stuff. We'll get the URL here. And do I have this site locked? I don't even know if I have. I probably should if I don't. Let's lock it with DrupalEasy. Lock environment, so that'll take a minute as well. But in here, I have to do Drupal easy at, so I can get past that lock now. All right, so if I were to just, git status, if I would go along and commit these two, and I'd have to, let's do a ddev drush config export as well. That way we get the fact that stage file proxy is enabled, and we have some basic settings there as well. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, clear this. All right, so if I were to add composer.json, composer.lock, that would get me stage file proxy, the module up on Pantheon. And then if I were to commit this would install stage file proxy up on Pantheon, and this would be the default settings for stage file proxy. The problem is that I don't need stage file proxy up on Pantheon because I'm going to make this the canonical location of, oh, there we go. DrupalEasy. I'm going to make this the canonical database for now. I don't have a stage or production site. So if I don't have the image on my local, I'm going to say, go get it on the dev site. So let's just make sure that that all works. So let's go, have to add a movie poster, right? Because I don't think I have a poster there. So let me add, where am I? Well, let's do it down here. As we are doing configuration management. Add field, select a field type. I don't have the image module enabled. So I use the minimal profile. So ddev drush en-y image field. I don't even know what it's called. Let's try image field. maybe it's just image. Oh, yay, okay. Reload. Image, okay, good. We can add image and we'll say poster image. Save and continue. And we'll just take all the defaults. All the defaults are fine. Hit save. Okay. So when we push this up to Pantheon, we'll be able to add a poster image, but we're not there yet. Okay, so a couple things. Number one, we don't want stage file proxy enabled or installed up on Pantheon. We only want it installed on our local, right? So, and we don't want to have to go every time we do a config export here. If I do a config export, I'm going to get the fact that stage file proxy is installed. I don't want that. So, I really don't want to have to do, a PM uninstall stage file proxy right before I do a config export every time. What I would really like, just to be able to do a config export and have Drupal be smart enough that I could say, hey, every time I do an export, anything having to do with stage file proxy, don't put that stuff in the config directory, put it somewhere else. Put it somewhere else that, is only relevant to my local. That's what config split does for us. All right, so let's go ahead and enable that. All right, so let's take a look at it over here on local. If we go to configuration, it's going to be under development here in a second. Config split settings. So we'll come here, there's no splits. Well, let's create a new split. We want to split off some local config. So let's call it local. Well, local development, that's what I normally call it. And let's put it in a new folder. So relative to the Drupal root. So I'm going to go up, so it says relative to the Drupal root. Okay, so you can see I always use the same. I have config splits / local. So it's going to be, right next to config. So here, let's just go ahead and create it. ls-al. It's going to be a sibling to config. So I'm just going to do a make dir config split. So do I singular or plural? Splits, plural. All right, then cd into that. And then make dir local. Yeah. And maybe I want to make it local _ development. That's probably a better practice so it matches the machine name just for consistency. So let's do that. All right, so cd. All right, so ls-al, there's my config splits. Inside of that, I've got a local development directory. And that's what this is for. If you only have one split, probably don't need a description, probably don't need to worry about the weight. Here's one of the tricks, or not one of the tricks, but the important bits. Set it to an active by default, right? That way, unless specifically told, it's not going to be active, which is kind of what we want for Pantheon Dev. We don't want it active for Pantheon Dev. So let's set it to inactive by default. Now, this is where we decide what do we want split out. Well, this is going to be very easy for us. Whoops. Sorry. Stage file proxy. Right? We want this module split out. And, it's always a good idea. I always like to come down here and also split out any of its settings. All right, and you can even type in additional configuration, but normally, and just for stage file proxy, this is good. And you can do very similar stuff with the devel module, but we'll just start with stage file proxy. So these two things, the thing that says that this is installed and these settings, they're going to be split into this directory instead of this directory. That's what we're configuring here. So there's a complete split, and then there's the idea of a conditional split, and this allows you to override, right? So this is basically saying, if we were to do a conditional split of stage file proxy here, it would only split it out if it were different than what's in config. So the vast majority of the time, so here, I'll give you an example. For developer stuff, you're usually doing a complete split. The conditional split is a good idea if you're using something like Search API. And your configuration for your Search API server is different on local than it is for your remote. Right? So in the main config, you've got the config for what it is, what your Search API configuration is for remote. But when you're on local, you want to override that with your local Search API config. That's when you would use conditional split. We don't need that now, so we're going to hit save. All right, so it's inactive. So, if we come over to development, config sync, yeah, there's a lot here. We're not using a config split. Even though we've installed it, we've configured it, it's inactive in this environment and pretty much in all environments. So this is where configuration split becomes really useful. Oh, and it used to be on this page. I guess it's going to be in a README now. There's a little snippet. I assume it's going to be in the README. So I will put this in. I'll show that. So I'm going to go into my local, right? This is settings.local. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say config split, my split, local development status true. This is basically setting this split active. And I'm doing it in settings.local. So it's only going to be active in my local. This file, settings.local, does not go up to Pantheon. And we set the split to be inactive. So it's going to be active everywhere except where this line is red, and this line is only going to be red on local. So now if we come over here and we reload, let me flush caches maybe. We're using split configuration local development. So at this point, once it's configured, you're done. It integrates with config import and config export commands. So you don't have to think about it. So if I do a ddev drush config export on my local, it's going to take into account that split now. There used to be a special command you'd have to run. That's a while ago. But we're just going to let this go. And now if we do an ls-al config splits local, here's those stage file proxy settings in my local development. They should no longer be in here, and they're not because they would be right between O and SY. If we look inside of the, where am I? Config. If we look inside the core.extension config, notice that stage file proxy is not in here. So that's weird because doesn't it need to be in here to be installed? Well, what happens is that config split actually has its own configuration. So here is the split for local development. And in here is where's it? That's the list of modules that get enabled when the local development split is active. So rather than this line being in the core.extension, it's now in the local development split. So, we're basically done. So we've done the config export. So this should come back clean, right? I think we're ready to commit everything. Clear, get status. So we have this for all of our, well, what is that? Get diff composer.json. So it basically added stage file proxy, the module, to the code base. That's fair. This is all because we added the image, the movie poster image field. Config core extension. Let's see what the diff is there. Get diff. Enabled config filter, enabled config split. So these are fine to be enabled in remote environments. These are only going to be active when you have this thing in your settings.php active. And then here's our image module. Here's our split configuration. This is all image field stuff. And then you can decide, do you want to put the splits in your repo or not? I normally put them in. Because if one person has, if you're on a team with multiple people, maybe you all want your local environments to use the same split. That way, when that way everyone's, when you do a config import on your local, everybody has stage file proxy, everyone has develop module, everyone has whatever else you need. So I normally commit them. You don't have to. So git add composer.json, composer.lock config. I think that's going to be it. Oh, config splits. Get status. All right. Git commit-m. Added stage file. How about added and configured stage file proxy and local development config split. Git push origin master. Oh, I typed too fast. There we go. All right. I'm going to go build the artifact now, so let that do its thing. So I think it's kind of hard to get into trouble with config read-only and config split. You can start getting into trouble with config read-only when you start issuing exemptions, putting stuff on the allow list. When we start talking about the next module, config ignore, that's kind of like level, let's say if level 1 is using the configuration system without any contributor modules, that's level 1. I'd say level 2 is using it with config read only and config split. Level 3 is using it with config ignore, I think, because config ignore basically tells the configuration to just flat out ignore some configuration files, meaning don't import or export them. So that puts you in a weird position where if you're not caring about them and everyone's not on the same page, if you're ignoring something and then you make a change on local and you think that you're exporting the configuration for that and you think that you're importing the configuration for that, nothing happens, that can be very confusing. Because there might be some times when you want, even though it's being ignored, where you want it to not ignore it. So I found I have a couple clients using config ignore, and it definitely muddies the waters of the configuration system. So I would be careful with that one, as well as the config read only whitelist, allow list stuff. I'd be careful with that as well. But I think it's pretty safe to use read only and split as long as you are comfortable with how they work. All right, so let's come over here and let's do okay, so I'm back on Pantheon Dev. So if we do, remember, if we hit this button, we're going to have 8 new, and it's a lot of image and movie poster stuff, but it's our split. And then we're changing core extension and we're changing these view modes. So I think we're safe to do all that. Let's do it. So it's installing those modules, even though those modules are not going to be active. That's the key. Our split is not active. So let's go there. Well, let's come here to config sync first. You're not using any configuration. I'll flush caches just to be 100% sure, because we had to do it on local. So no splits are being used, even if that split is listed here, which it will be, it's inactive. And this is fine. This is 100% fine. You can have this on production, it's fine. But if we get, not structure, if we go to extend, stage file proxy is not enabled. But on local, stage file proxy is enabled, and all of our configuration is synced, and we don't have to do any disabling or uninstall stage file proxy before exporting. Everything is the way we want it. So let's test things. Let's go to, we'll add a movie. And Batman, HTTPS. I don't know if this is batman.com, a real site. I just know that I have lots of Batman images that I can use for a movie poster. So that's what we're going with. I don't think I have a Batman movie poster though. Oh, do I have a Back to the Future movie poster? I might have Back to the Future. Let me see. No, I got the logo. All right, let's go with what's Batman? It's here. What's that one? Oh, let's go with this one. It's definitely not a movie poster, but it's still a Batman. Action figure. So let's save that. All right, so that seems to be working. So let's go ahead and test stage file proxy. So let's create a backup. Well, I'm just going to download the database, not the files directory, and I'm going to import that database on my local. Put it in the right place. LS-L. There's the database right there. So I'm going to do a ddev import db, source being DCO D9. There we go. Get that import going. So that's, it's going to wipe out my local database. So I'm just going to do a drush CR right from here, and then I'm going to do a config import. Ddev drush cim-y. So CIM short for config import. So we'll do all that. So now keep in mind, I do not have a ls-al website default files. Where would it be? I guess, well, I don't even know. Let me see. If I were to have a Batman image on my local, I just want to point, I want to see the before and after. Oh, it's just gonna be right in the files directory. Oh, no, 21, there's gonna be a 2021-05 directory. You can see it down here. Clearly, I do not have a 2021-05 directory yet. But if I go to my local and I go to the home page, well, I'm not gonna be logged in anymore. So I'm gonna have to log in. Oh boy, anybody remember what my credentials were? Let's do ddev drush uli. User login. Remember, it gives you a little handy link to reset. Oops, I went to the wrong window. Handy link to reset the password. And I'm on my local here, so No, don't use. Admin. Just going to reset on my local. That's safe. Save. Okay, can't type the word admin. 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 Okay. All right, so now if I go to content and I look at Batman, it's going to take a second, but there's the image now on my local. And now if I come here, look, I suddenly have a 2021-05 directory. And I suddenly have, so stage file proxy is working on my local and not being used on the remote. And our config is all in sync. And that's all good. So Matt, I know you said that you'd made a mess of config local. What did I do differently? Anything?
Well, I made a mess with config split.
That's what I meant, config split.
So I'm more curious how you would set it up to have different settings for like dev and prod, the conditional split.
Oh, the conditional split. Okay. All right. Yeah, there's another way to do it. You could, so I'm not a big fan of the conditional split. But what I have done is I've come in here and I've made a production split. So then on my local, the local is enabled and the production is disabled. And on production, I swap it.
And so would you have the same items split out into different folders and have them different? Okay.
Yeah, because the conditional split, I find it hard, I find it harder to set up and just harder to work with it. So I actually have one project where we have 3 splits. We have a local, a dev, and a production split. And honestly, what you can do is you can actually, what you would do is you would set up the production split. You don't even have to configure it here, on local. Just get it set up. Set up your settings.php so it's active on production, or reboot, whatever you want to call it. And then go to the production site, configure things the way you want it to configure, and then do it config export.
Okay. And
then that will put it in that split. And then just make sure everything's, so you can do it that way. You can do some fancier stuff where you can literally, you can take the split data that's in here, like copy this file, move it into a production split, and then just literally tweak these things. If you're doing like stage file proxy, I'm not saying if you're doing like a search API with like different credentials and stuff.
Well, and maybe it's just my lack of experience, but especially trying to do fields and instances and whatnot.
So you're going to split out fields. So that's pretty rare, I think, where you're having.
Yeah, I've managed to make a dog's dinner out of it.
So why would you, what's the use case for having fields only exist in, because then you're kind of messing with the database structure as well. So.
Oh yeah. But like if you wanted to have almost like a, why can I not think of the word, but like a deployment package where you want to add these 17 fields to this site. And it's something you do on a continual basis as opposed to, going through and doing them all by hand.
That seems like it's more of a feature though.
I tried using features and I don't think very much of features in Drupal 8. It actually told me that it was unable to create fields when I tried to do it. I don't know. I'm not doing something correctly, apparently.
So you're thinking that you want to have a split, and let's just keep it simple. Like you want to split that when that split is active, it adds a new field to some entity.
Yes.
So what happens if you, but then where does the data for that field come from? You're not going to have, I mean, anytime you add that field, you're not going to have any data for that field. It's just going to be an empty field.
Right. Right.
I mean, all right, so here's probably what I would recommend in that situation. I would keep the, so when you add a field, one thing I like about the minimal site install is it keeps your config nice and small. So when you add a field, you're going to get field storage. So let's look at that. Here's the official, here's the poster one. So you're going to get a field store. I wish it was bigger somewhere, but this is it. Field storage. This is like the base field. And then you're going to get the instance, which is like this one right here. So I would say only split out the instance. Never split out the storage.
You have to, don't you? I mean, say you're going to add this field to a new site and you just try to add the instance, it's going to scream at you that the
no. What I'm saying is put the storage in your main config. So even if that field is not, you don't want that field on the site yet, you know, it's the base field's created. And then when you want to deploy that field, you just basically deploy the instance.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That might get you, you might end up with like a chicken and the egg problem the other way. Well, is it chicken? What would happen? Is there ever going to be a case where you have multiple splits that involve the same field?
I don't know, because I've never done it successfully. So
I would start simple. I would start with one field in one split. I mean, we can try it now. It's kind of an edge case, but let's see. So if I come over here to my local and I come over to development, config split, I'm going to add a new split. And I'm going to call it, well, here, I actually have to add the field first. So let me do that. Movie. There are two squirrels right outside my window. What are they doing? One is like biting the other one's tail. Is this like an aggressive move or a mating move? Can I put my camera over there? My camera over there? They're there. You see it. There you go. You guys can watch the squirrels while I talk. There's three of them now. See, look at that. He's like chewing on the other one's tail. All right.
This has been your unexpected wildlife cam for the day.
Exactly. All right. Anyway, so I'm going to add a field. We're just going to add just a silly little text field. We're going to name it Matt. And I don't care what the configuration is. All right, so we want to split this up. All right, so let's go to configuration, development, config split, create new split setting, and we're going to call this mass split.
And I do actually have a use case for you.
Oh,
maybe you can tell me that I'm doing something completely wrong.
So mass split, make it inactive. And so what I'm going to do here is, well, here, let's do it this way. So I'm going to do a config export first. ddev drush config export. Because I want to see these names. Yeah, so we probably have to split. So this is probably where you might run into trouble. This is actually, I think this is where you need conditional. It needs to be a conditional split because we can't split these three out because they have to be in the base when this field isn't there, and they have to be in the split when those fields are there.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's where I always
okay.
wind up destroying.
So let's do this. Let's just try it. So let's put the two field ones in the so here is the instance field, and here's the storage. All right, so those are those two. And now we need the two display modes and the view mode. I'm sorry, the two view modes and the form mode. So where that's going to be core.entity form, core. So movie, and then where's entity form, movie. All right, so this will split them out. Split only when different. Include dependent configuration. I think that's probably safe. So let's do this. Okay, dir config split mass split. I'll make sure that it's not split. Okay. Still got stuff in there, right? Okay, good. Okay, so if I do well, I guess I should enable that one. All right, so let's enable that one. Where am I? Settings.local, where are you? There you are. Not split status true. Let's just verify that it's flush. There we go. Okay, local and not split. And I've already done the export, so that's why we don't see the field stuff. I did the export here, but I have to do another one. And let's see what happens. So when you're doing Drush, it doesn't tell you doesn't tell you details about the split, which is unfortunate. You kind of have to look at the files to know. So this should be clean now because we've just done an export. So this should be clean, which it is. All right. So well, we'll leave that open for now. In our split, all right, so those two are there. The conditional ones are not. But that might be, let's see. Let's take a look here. Where's our split? Well, that's because the machine names haven't been updated. Let's see, gray. Okay, so these are gray listed. Well, let's see what happens. Let's commit this stuff. Let's see what happens on Pantheon. So they've been modified. So they now have, this is the only thing I'm a little worried about. Copy, git, diff. Yeah, they have information about field mat. Yeah, so there's going to be a problem, right? Because if these are in the main config, which they are, when we do the config import, it's going to choke. It's going to say, because mat split is not going to be active on Pantheon. So it's going to choke, and it's basically going to say, hey, no. There's a dependency that I don't have, which is this one. Because this is in the split, which is inactive. So this is not going to work. So what we want to do is we want to have we basically want, Yeah, I know what we want to do. I just don't know. Like basically, I want to have a copy of these. Where are they? I want to have in the main. I want these things to not have mat, but in the split, I want these things to have the mat stuff. So if let's see, let me try disabling the split first. Let's see if we can't get this. So I'm gonna disable the mat split. And I'm gonna just do it from here. Dev drush cr, rebuild caches, and then I'm gonna do another config export. Wait, if I do a config export right now, this stuff is in the database right now. If I do a config export, it's going to go into the main config. So I guess maybe my mistake was well, let's see, it's not in there yet though, right? Yeah, why didn't it split it out already? Now that's what I'm thinking. Let's see, so config, entity view mode, movie, display area. So maybe if so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna delete those fields. I'm gonna delete those fields right now because they exist in here. No, you know what I'm gonna do? I don't know if this is gonna work, but I'm gonna try it. Yeah, the setup is a pain here, but I think we can get where we need to get. Oh, let me just do it through. How about this? Can I copy stuff from here? I don't want to copy path. I just want to copy the whole thing. Open in VBO and Finder. I'm just gonna do it in the Finder. All right, so we need that one, and so that's form mode, view display. Okay. So I want to copy those. I'm going to go to splits, I'm going to mat splits, and I want to paste them in there. Okay, so that's kind of our backup, not our backup, but that's our split. That's the way we want things with the split. So just for the heck of it, if I come over here and I'm going to get rid of that field, I disabled the split, right? Let me just verify it's disabled. All right, it's disabled. All right, so now I'm going to come over, I'm going to delete that field. All right, so with it deleted, well, here, let me just do a config export. Dev drush config. So this is the base. So the base configuration does not have that field. So I'm going to make sure we capture that. And this is right, because this is going to remove that from that stuff. All right, so now if I come over to if I come over now, I enable the split, which is already configured. If I do a dev drush config import, that should bring in the split stuff. Rebuild caches again. Yes. All right, so successful. So if I reload this, we got the map field, and I'm going to assume that it's working. All right, everything's cool there. All right, so git status, git add config, config splits. No, wrong. Config space, config splits. Okay, git status, git commit dash m, added map split stuff. So I think this is going to work, Matt. And, you know, the pain, as you saw, the pain is getting it set up. Because I think what you want to do, like, I'm not sure how to do it off the top of my head without that little manual copy I did in the middle. Although I did a config export early on just so I can get the names of those configs. If I didn't do that, maybe it would have worked. I would have had to scroll through, you know, I would have had to come here and I did a config export just so I can find, you know, these things. But maybe if I didn't do that export and just searched and found and clicked, maybe that's all that would have been necessary. But I don't see any reason why this isn't going to work, because it's the split is enabled on local and it seems to be working, and it's not going to be enabled on Pantheon, so there shouldn't be any changes, so everything should be cool. So I didn't do anything funky with the storage or the instance. They're both in the split, and I put the view mode and form mode stuff as conditional. So multiply that by 17 times for your 17 fields. So this should show, oh, I have to do an import. I'm not going to see anything here. Yeah, do an import first.
So let me give you a use case and get feedback on how you would implement it. So let's say we've got 14 sites, very similar, but all just a tiny bit different. Have to implement an enhancement to an existing process that requires 2 more fields. And so you get it working on local, everything's good, but then you need to deploy that across these 14 sites. They all have the same content type, but each one's just a tiny bit different.
Like machine names are different?
No, machine names are the same, but the actual fields within that bundle might be different depending on which features.
It feels like a features module.
I know. I've not been able to get features.
Sorry, you know.
All right.
It really feels like a features module thing to me.
I know.
It doesn't feel like a config split thing to me.
Yeah, I think I've been trying to pound a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, so here, I'll put it on the list for a future office hours and we can tackle it. I have no problem with that. So let me, where's the list? So,
and I actually run into this issue a lot, and I spend a ridiculous amount of time doing things manually that should not be done manually.
All right, so let's do this. I want to take a break, so I'm going to pause the recording here. But before I do, let's talk about config ignore. I'm thinking let's punt on that till another week, unless anyone really wants to see it, because I've been going for over an hour, and I don't want to like monopolize all of office hours with this. So is that cool if we punt on config ignore till another week? Anybody have a pressing need for it?
No, that sounds good.
All right. I'm going to stop the recording and then I'm going to take a break. Stop recording.